Hi everybody. I'm actually sort of taking a mini break from the hardcore US stuff for a few days, and I'm interested in following this up with a reading on the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. Now, what I read yesterday is very interesting. This is such a Trump exercise, right? He's opening the embassy in Jerusalem very soon, the next day or so, or whatever it is. But it's not open. The embassy will not be open. The embassy has yet to be fitted out. It will take years. This is such a vacuous Trump moment. It's a completely fake exercise. So there'll be this ribbon cutting and all this crap going on, but no one is going to be working in this building. They're going to be working out of Tel Aviv for the next 5 to 7 years. Is that not pure Trump? I'm opening an embassy in Jerusalem. No, you're not, love. No. That's just another line. So, although we'll see scenes of ecstatic Israelis and those from Gaza in despair, it's actually not going to happen in the way he's sort of saying it will. It just doesn't. The US Embassy in London is moving, and it's taken 8 years. They're very complex things, embassies in high-risk zones. So I thought I'd take a look at several aspects of this. So this move is a promise to his base, meaning the evangelicals, who have a very knotty, strange relationship. They're actually naturally anti-Semitic because they're anti-anyone who is an Anglo. But the Bible talks about Jerusalem, so therefore they like Israel. I think most of them would struggle to remember that Jesus was a Jew and Christianity is a Jewish sect. So, you know, it's embroiled in all this history and fiction and stuff. So I'm going to ask a series of little questions about the US Embassy in Jerusalem. Now, given that we know, and I can assure you, dear intrepid viewers, Trump will not be around by the time the embassy is open. So the first question, I think, is, will the embassy be finished and start running in Jerusalem? So that's the first question. In other words, whoever's the next president, Pence would roll it on, but he's only going to be president at all for 5 minutes. So he's not a real player. So will the embassy actually open? I'm not talking ribbon snipping here. I'm talking open as a functioning embassy. And I've brought out the Crowley deck. The embassy in Jerusalem. Oh, first card. Okay, the first card was the Lovers. Now, I think this is Trump loving up the base and vice versa. He's doing this to please the base, but not least of this is Jared Kushner being a Jewish man. It's a huge feather in his cap if he can do this, and given he can't do anything on his other portfolios, this would be a significant step for him. Okay, so he's doing it for love of family, he's doing it for love of the base, he's doing it for love without understanding the issues. How is that different from anything else he does? Okay, so, just before we leave Kushner, in his capacity as reinventing the whole of how the US government runs its cyber institutions, and many of you will have seen, he got a damning report from his attempt to modernise veteran affairs. Yet again, it comes back to veteran affairs. It's like they're the sacrificial lambs, you know, for his experiments, Jared Kushner's social experiments. It's a complete disaster. He got some whiz kid from Silicon Valley to do it. It doesn't work like that. These people just don't get how governments work. And they're big, cumbersome beasts, government departments. But you can't reinvent them overnight. And just a small story, it would be at least 20 years ago when I went to conferences and worked in hospitals that e-health was just around the corner, and we would all have e-health, and so a doctor in a remote location could easily access, you know, medical information on anybody, anywhere, and so forth. Well, it's failed over the last 20 years. We're still waiting for e-health, and the main problem is in e-health, and it's the same with what he attempted in veteran affairs, these systems don't talk to each other very well. You can have a fabulous fuck-off brilliant system, but can it talk to the computer next door? No. Okay, sorry. Off on a tangent. So the lovers, we know why he's doing it. It's got the Queen of Swords, and if you look in the Crowley deck, the Queen of Swords is an interesting character. All Queen of Swords are at their best, striking through for truth and justice and smartness and carrying forward, but there's also a cruelty. There's a cruel dimension to the Queen of Swords. And in this deck, she's laying back and she's about to strike out. So with the Queen of Swords in that position of recent past, it continues on from the emotional theme of the lovers, but it's complex, and you will notice the clouds and the rocks that are associated with this particular imagery. And the reason I make that interpretation of the Queen of Swords, who, by the way, has been beheading someone. She has a sword in one hand and a severed head in the other. Interesting imagery. We then move to the moon, the very Egyptian moon. And so that's about hidden agendas and deep secrets. And Trump hasn't got a clue. Next, the Hanged Man, the suspended figure. Right, so that would say to me that exactly as I was describing the Hanged Man, it's waiting. It's a waiting game. It's a long way off. And I'm not entirely convinced it will actually happen. Right. So the Hanged Man, final decisions have yet to be made. Massive amounts of work need to be done. Trump will be gone. It's in abeyance. It's hanging in as an idea. But I'm not seeing it. Okay. So, putting those back, how will it impact on the Middle East itself in the broader picture? Okay, how will the US Embassy in Jerusalem impact on the Middle East? US Embassy. Okay. Okay, Eight of Swords, Princess of Tears. Okie dokie. Well, the top card, the main card, here we have the Eight of Wands. In the Rider-Waite deck, that's the ones with all the spears flying. It indicates swiftness. So, on the one hand, when this was announced, there wasn't much of a reaction. And now the token opening is happening. We're going to see a more swift reaction here. The Princess of Discs, there will be financial considerations because the next card is the Ten of Pentacles, wealth. So these are two money cards. This, like every other big move in the world, always comes down to money. So who's got the most power and the most money? Well, it's certainly not the Palestinians. So you would have to say this is more talking about Israel and the money it's prepared to spend to try and make this happen. And, dear viewers, it's also a very complex issue from the point of view, on the one hand, we will see celebrations in the street from many Israelis, but there's also a more complex dialogue going on, and not all Israelis and not all Jews are supportive of this move because of the volatility in the region. So if you read more lefty or independent Jewish outlets, they see this as quite a provocative act and not necessarily in everyone's best interest. So it's not as though people are in very clear-cut camps, but a lot of money will be spent on this. This comes out with the Strength card. So the Strength card would indicate that people have very strong feelings about this. I think Trump has been lucky in a way, the timing of this, which again is one of his accidental coups. The Middle East is exhausted through war. It's exhausted through the Palestinian conflict, long term. It's exhausted through the Syrian conflict. Lebanon is exhausted. Jordan, they've taken in so many refugees from Iraq. 4 million Iraqis displaced during the war, the forgotten people of Iraq. Mission accomplished? I so don't think so. So the strong feelings are going to build, and they're going to build quite quickly now that it's happening. But I think, I'll just pull another card or two. The Queen of Discs. So we have the Princess of Discs and the Queen of Discs. Women in the Middle East. This is interesting. So there might be a gender division on this. There might be a position where women more collectively are taking, dare I say, a more reasonable line, and the men are much more volatile. So if heaven forbid, if there was a terrorist act in retaliation for this, the women will speak up. That's when we'll hear the voices of women in the Middle East for this. But it also involves money yet again. Okay. Well, just one more little on that before we move on to other topics. Okay. Let's see, what is the next question? Will this embassy in the Middle East, excuse me, we know it has a symbolic role. Okay, so in fact, how is this going to impact on the US-Israeli relationship? which again is very weird. On the one hand, each one describes each other as their bestie, their total best friend, their best ally, the most reliable partner, the best in the world. And yet there is so much anti-Semitism, and from the Jewish perspective, also there's a bit of shade going on, a bit of what are the Americans really up to? They don't get the region really, but we want them on our side. So how's the embassy going to impact on that relationship? I'd imagine it would strengthen the relationship, but we'll see. The first card, yeah, being the Strength card, which came out again. However, there are other issues going on. Now, straight under the Strength card, you've got the Peace card, which superficially you'd have to think is a wonderful card. Will this encourage peace in the Middle East? Just because we've got the P word, we shouldn't leap to that conclusion too readily, because I'll describe the other cards to you. But this is the language that is going to be used to support this move. That this is actually, and I've heard Bolton say this, by being straight up with people, you have a better chance of getting a result. And like I said in my previous video on North Korea, Trump is going to have this success probably with the North Korea, South Korea, bringing them back together, and think he can roll out this sort of way of doing business across everything he does, when in fact it's a one-off freak thing. But credit where credit's due. If he pulls it off, more power to his elbow in that regard. But the Middle East is infinitely more complicated than this. So I read this as what is at stake is peace in the Middle East. You have here the Seven of Cups, debauchery, in this deck, the Thoth deck. In the Rider-Waite, it's the card of delusion and illusion. The Outcome card is lust. So it's interesting you've got debauchery and lust. They're very sexual terms. I don't think they're meant in a sexual way here. It's like the lust for this on Trump's behalf as a coup is so strong, it's what's driving it. So I have to do another card here. Oppression. So one person's victory is another person's loss and nightmare. So oppression, you would have to think it's not going to improve for the Palestinians in this scenario, unfortunately. So having the US embassy in Jerusalem is another reason to keep Palestinians under control. It's a very sad and complex situation, and I don't think it's going to be resolved, certainly not with a fake embassy. It's like a present that's an empty box. It's an empty building. I'm sure they'll bring out the stage props for the opening, but it's an empty building. All right, moving on, troops. Love you. Bye.